The nuclear defense protocols of the United States of America do not reside exclusively inside the presidential emergency satchel. The environmental control algorithms keeping 6 astronauts alive in the vacuum of space are not secured behind blast doors in Huntsville, Alabama. On a humid night in 1999, those assets sat quietly on a dusty hard drive tucked under a teenager's bed in a suburban Miami home. The entity guarding the apex of American military intelligence was a 15-year-old boy wearing pajamas, drinking soda, and running a custom Linux build. July 21st, 1999, Huntsville, Alabama, the Marshall Space Flight Center. System administrators stared at their monitors in absolute silence. Lines of source code were actively evaporating from their directories. Someone was inside the network. This was not a glitch. It was an extraction. They watched as the architecture for the environmental control and life support system vanished file by file. That code regulated oxygen generation. It managed carbon dioxide removal. It dictated water recovery and thermal shielding for the International Space Station. The space station was currently orbiting Earth at 17,500 miles per hour. 6 human beings were strapped inside a metal tube, relying entirely on software that an invisible intruder was currently siphoning through an open port. The protocol for a catastrophic breach is rigid. NASA engineers scrambled to physically sever connections. They pulled cables. They executed hard shutdowns. Within minutes, 43 mission-critical servers went completely dark. For the next 21 days, the International Space Station operated on emergency backup systems, isolated from the primary ground control network. NASA launched a massive internal audit. They had to verify 3.2 million lines of code across dozens of fractured mainframes. The assumption in the war room was terrifying. A state-sponsored cyber warfare unit had penetrated their defenses. The Chinese military, the Russian SVR. Only a coordinated intelligence apparatus could bypass the firewall architecture of the premier space agency on the planet. They were wrong. The breach did not originate from a subterranean bunker in Moscow. It originated 22 days earlier in a sweltering bedroom in South Florida. June 29th, 1999, Miami. Jonathan James, known online as C.O. Emraid, sat illuminated by the harsh glow of a CRT monitor. He was 15. He was currently failing high school history due to chronic absenteeism. While his classmates studied for driving permits, Jonathan studied declassified National Security Agency documents on electromagnetic shielding. He collected zero-day exploits. That night, his automated port scanner returned an interesting ping. IP address 192.76.91.54. The reverse DNS lookup translated the string to a domain that made his pulse jump. nas3.msfc.nasa.gov. The Marshall Space Flight Center. Jonathan assumed it was a trap, a honeypot designed to catch amateur script kiddies. The agency that put men on the moon could not possibly be this vulnerable. He ran the diagnostic scan 3 consecutive times. The results remained identical. NASA was operating public-facing servers with telnet ports left wide open. The administrative root password for the system was password 123. It was a configuration error so glaring it bordered on the absurd. The digital perimeter of the American space program was objectively weaker than the grading system at Jonathan's local middle school. He did not hesitate. He did not mask his point of entry with elaborate routing. He simply walked through the front door. Jonathan initiated a standard buffer overflow attack targeting a vulnerability in the bind domain name system service. A buffer overflow is a blunt force instrument. You flood a memory block with more data than it can hold, causing the excess to spill into adjacent memory spaces and execute malicious instructions. It is the digital equivalent of pouring water into a glass until it shatters the table underneath. The bind exploit granted him basic user privileges. It was merely a foothold. From there, he deployed a local kernel exploit that had been published on obscure message boards just weeks prior. The execution was flawless. Within exactly 17 minutes, Jonathan escalated his privileges and acquired root access. Complete administrative dominance over 13 interconnected NASA mainframes. No alarms triggered in Huntsville. No automated intrusion detection software flagged the anomaly. A high school sophomore now possessed God-tier control over the environmental parameters of the space station. Jonathan found the source code repositories. He highlighted the ECLSS directories, 3,471 distinct files, 38 megabytes of proprietary engineering data. NASA valued this specific software module at $50,000. To Jonathan, it was simply an interesting trophy. At 11:43 p.m., he initiated the file transfer. His personal computer was connected to the internet via a standard 56K dial-up modem. The data crawled through the copper telephone lines at a maximum speed of 5.2 kilobytes per second. A state-sponsored extraction of this magnitude would utilize encrypted broadband bursts lasting fractions of a second. Jonathan had to sit in his rolling chair for 2 agonizing hours, watching a pixelated progress bar slowly creep across his screen. Every single percentage point represented a critical piece of the barrier keeping astronauts from freezing or suffocating in the vacuum of space. He listened to the mechanical clicking of his hard drive, writing the stolen data block by block. By 1:52 a.m., the transfer concluded. He possessed the complete source code. He opened the files expecting to find elegant, highly sophisticated programming structures. Instead, he found a mess. The million-dollar software was riddled with deprecated functions. The developers had utilized hard-coded values. The structural comments were written inconsistently across 3 different programming languages. The code keeping American astronauts alive looked like a rushed university project compiled at the last minute. Jonathan opened his IRC client. He typed a message to his anonymous peers. "This is crap. My Linux kernel has better error handling." He stared at the blinking cursor. The realization washed over him. If the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was this fundamentally incompetent, what else was lying unprotected on the internet? Another user in the chat channel echoed his exact thought. If NASA is this weak, imagine the Pentagon. Jonathan minimized the NASA directories. He opened a fresh terminal window. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency managed America's nuclear weapons, biological warfare containment, and chemical defense protocols. NASA had been an embarrassing joke. He wanted to know exactly what the military was hiding. He cracked his knuckles and began typing. The ultimate game of cat and mouse had just begun, but the cat did not even know it was playing. Before we uncover exactly how a teenager cracked the United States nuclear defense grid, if you want to understand the fragile reality behind the world's most secure systems, subscribe to Clarity Uncovered. We expose the raw truth behind these breaches. Now watch what happens when the military ignores a simple software update. August 14th, 1999. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency operated 847 active servers spread across 17 geographic locations. Jonathan targeted their primary data hub in Dulles, Virginia. This facility acted as the central nervous system connecting Fort Belvoir, Kirtland Air Force Base, and the Pentagon itself. The core router handling this massive influx of classified traffic was a Cisco 7206 VXR. It was running Internetwork Operating System version 11.1. That software was 3 years out of date. It possessed 14 publicly documented vulnerabilities. Cisco had issued a critical security patch for this specific flaw in 1997. The Pentagon simply never bothered to install it. Jonathan crafted a single, specialized data packet. He fired it at the Dulles router. The router processed the malformed packet and instantly granted him enable mode access. The digital fortress protecting America's nuclear arsenal cracked open like a cheap master lock. He did not just want access. He wanted intelligence. On August 19th, he wrote a custom packet sniffing program. He deployed it directly onto the D-Tray network backbone. Every single piece of data flowing through the Dulles facility now automatically duplicated itself and routed quietly back to a server controlled by a 15-year-old. Over the next 4 weeks, his sniffer captured 3,312 internal emails. It harvested 1,879 unique passwords. He captured 19 active user accounts belonging to high-ranking military personnel. He possessed the login credentials for workstations physically located inside the E-ring of the Pentagon, the innermost corridor where the Joint Chiefs of Staff planned global defense strategies. September 3rd, 1999. Jonathan used the stolen credentials to log into a major's workstation. He found 1,247 classified files sitting on the desktop. Threat assessments detailing North Korean ballistic missile capabilities, contingency protocols for a synchronized biological weapon attack on major American population centers. He opened a folder designated Operation Dragon Tempest. It contained highly classified cyber warfare strategies targeting China's military networks. The irony was absolute. The document discussed exploiting the exact same network vulnerabilities Jonathan had just used to bypass their own security. He read deployment schedules for chemical weapon response teams. He read satellite surveillance tasking orders hovering over Iraq. The most sensitive extraction occurred on September 18th. He intercepted a secure email thread between the DTRA director and the Secretary of Defense. They were discussing a $298 million budget allocation for cooperative threat reduction. The program involved securing loose nuclear warheads in former Soviet republics. The emails contained the exact GPS coordinates of vulnerable warhead storage facilities in Kazakhstan. They detailed the transport schedules for weapons-grade uranium out of Ukraine. He read the operational briefing for Project Sapphire. America was secretly airlifting 600 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium from Kazakhstan to prevent immediate theft by rogue states. These were not historical archives. These were live, ongoing, covert operations. Jonathan watched them unfold in real time from his bedroom while his parents slept down the hall. He never attempted to sell the data. He never weaponized the intelligence. To him, it was merely proof of concept. He created a directory on his hard drive and named it Pentagon Trophies. He dumped the highest classification files inside and locked it with military-grade 256-bit encryption. He returned to his IRC channel. He typed a single sentence into the chat. "I could start World War III with what I know." Another user challenged the claim. Jonathan did not argue. He simply copied a single string of text from a classified memo and pasted it into the public channel. TS/SCI/NOFORN/ORCON. Top secret. Sensitive, compartmented information. No foreign nationals. Originator controlled. The chat room went completely dead. Every veteran hacker in the channel understood exactly what that string meant. Comrade had compromised the United States Department of Defense. October 29, 1999. The system finally noticed the bleeding. DTRA security analyst Rebecca Foster was reviewing routine log files from the Dulles router. She noticed subtle, consistent anomalies. Data packets were taking microseconds longer to route. She initiated a deep trace. The diagnostics revealed the unauthorized packet sniffer. Someone had been siphoning their entire classified data stream, byte by byte, for 10 consecutive weeks. Foster escalated the finding immediately. The Pentagon triggered Flashpoint Alpha, their highest cybersecurity alert protocol. Within hours, the architecture of American cyber defense converged on DTRA headquarters. Investigators from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and the FBI Cyber Division took control of the server rooms. They analyzed the custom malware. They noted the careful operational security. There were no obvious attribution markers left behind. The behavioral profile suggested a highly sophisticated, state-sponsored operation. The war room rapidly formed a consensus. They were dealing with Russia's SVR, or a newly formed cyber warfare unit out of Beijing. No one in that room suggested checking the attendance records of a Miami high school. The FBI investigation team began tracing the intrusion backward. It was a digital labyrinth. The ghost had routed his connection through 17 different proxy servers spanning 9 separate countries. The signal bounced from Russia to China, down to Brazil, and across to Romania. Each hop was deliberately selected to cross hostile jurisdictions and paralyze any legal subpoenas. The ghost was completely untraceable. He had engineered a perfect digital vanishing act. But the ghost made one mechanical error. He became lazy. Jonathan occasionally bypassed his intricate proxy chain to test specific zero-day exploits directly from his terminal. He calculated that a connection lasting only a few milliseconds would never register in the massive, chaotic data logs of the Pentagon. On November 14th, investigators sifting through mountains of forensic packet data found the anomaly. 3 seconds of unmasked direct connection. The IP address was 24.93.41.106. The reverse lookup did not point to a server farm in St. Petersburg or a military compound in Beijing. It pointed to a residential Bell South customer named Robert James, located in the quiet suburb of Pinecrest, Florida. They immediately cross-referenced the IP address with the ongoing, highly classified NASA investigation from the summer. The digital signature matched perfectly. The mastermind systematically dismantling American national security had a physical location. He had a name. Jonathan James, age 16, student at South Miami Senior High School. The Federal Bureau of Investigation placed the teenager under intense physical surveillance on December 8th. Highly trained field agents, accustomed to tracking foreign spies, sat in unmarked sedans watching a high school sophomore ride his bicycle to class. They documented him eating lunch entirely alone in the cafeteria. They logged his return home precisely at 3:15 p.m. every single afternoon. They monitored his outbound internet traffic. He was no longer penetrating defense networks. He was playing online video games and researching rudimentary homework assignments. The agents interviewed his teachers under strict, legally binding non-disclosure agreements. His computer science instructor mentioned a recent incident where district administrators locked themselves completely out of the school's network infrastructure. Jonathan restored full administrative access during his 30-minute lunch break. He executed in 20 minutes what their salaried IT contractor failed to accomplish in 2 days. The FBI task force realized a terrifying, humiliating truth. They were not tracking a hardened foreign operative. They were tracking a bored, gifted child, treating global security infrastructure like a digital sandbox.
January 26th, 2000, 4:30 a.m. The arrest team assembled in the pre-dawn darkness of a quiet Miami neighborhood. 15 federal agents clad in heavy tactical gear, 3 local police cruisers securing the perimeter blocks. 1 cybercrime forensic specialist flown in directly from Carnegie Mellon University to preserve the volatile digital evidence. They formulated contingency plans for armed resistance. They anticipated sophisticated dead man switches programmed to wipe hard drives the moment the front door breached. They expected EMP devices. The tactical units stacked up outside a suburban house with peeling paint, an overgrown lawn, and a broken porch light.
Special Agent Mark Anderson gave the breach signal at precisely 5:47 a.m. The heavy steel ram slammed into the front door. It was completely unlocked. The tactical team flooded the narrow hallway, weapons drawn, shouting overlapping commands to secure the premises. They rushed the master bedroom. They found their target sitting exactly where the IP logs indicated. Jonathan was wearing loose pajamas, facing his glowing CRT monitor, heavy headphones clamped securely over his ears. His fingers were flying across the mechanical keyboard in a blur of motion. He did not even hear the raid unfold. He did not flinch when heavily armed men filled his cramped room. He only stopped typing when Agent Anderson physically grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. Jonathan turned slowly in his rolling chair. He looked at the Kevlar vests. He looked at the drawn firearms pointing at his chest. He looked at the federal badges glinting in the monitor light. His heart rate did not visibly spike. He did not panic. He simply looked at the lead investigator and spoke in a flat, deadpan tone. "I wondered when you would show up." The evidence seizure lasted 4 agonizing hours. The forensics team cataloged the digital destruction of a 15-year-old boy's childhood. 13 physical hard drives, 271 CD-ROMs, 44 floppy disks, 3 laptops, 2 massive custom-built desktop towers. They seized his spiral-bound notebook from the bottom desk drawer. It contained handwritten, meticulous documentation of 89 separate, successful network intrusions. He had successfully compromised the Ford Motor Company, Lockheed Martin, and the Miami-Dade School District before he ever touched NASA or the Department of Defense. The most devastating evidence was not extracted from the hard drives. It was provided directly by Jonathan during his marathon interrogation. He sat in a sterile federal holding room, drinking a soda, and delivered a comprehensive technical lecture to the highly trained men who arrested him. He walked the FBI cyber division through complex kernel exploits they did not even know existed. He diagrammed his routing methodologies on a whiteboard using precise network topology. Agent Anderson later stated under oath that a 16-year-old taught them more about their own critical vulnerabilities in 6 hours than multi-million-dollar security audits had discovered in 6 years. He confessed completely. He detailed the Cisco router flaws. He explained the send-mail backdoors. He provided the architectural maps he had drawn of the Pentagon's internal network from memory. September 21st, 2000. Jonathan stood in the federal courthouse of the Southern District of Florida. He wore his father's oversized suit, drowning in the fabric. He was formally charged with 2 counts of juvenile computer crime. The prosecution highlighted the unprecedented nature of the breach. The youngest individual to ever access classified nuclear defense information in United States history. Total quantifiable damages to the military and space program exceeding $1.7 million. The judge sentenced him to 6 months in a federal juvenile detention facility. He was strictly banned from recreational computer use until age 18. The court also mandated a highly unusual provision. The teenager was legally ordered to brief federal security teams about his exact methodologies. The multi-billion-dollar defense system he humiliated was now legally forcing him to fix their staggering incompetence. Jonathan served his time. He taught basic math to illiterate inmates in his cell block. He wrote an extensive essay titled "Trust Architecture: Why Humans Are Always the Weakest Link." It was so insightful, it immediately became required reading at the National Security Agency's Internal Training Academy. He was released into a rapidly shifting post-9/11 world where cybersecurity was no longer considered a fringe game, but a paramount focus of the global war on terror. In 2007, a massive data breach hit TJX companies. 45 million credit card numbers were siphoned by an unknown syndicate. Federal investigators immediately suspected Jonathan James. They lacked any physical evidence, they lacked any IP logs, but his name remained permanently etched into their suspect profiles. The surveillance aggressively resumed. The pressure mounted. The assumption of guilt from the very system he had previously exposed became suffocating. On May 18, 2008, Jonathan James took his own life. He was 24 years old. He left a handwritten note stating he had zero faith in the justice system. The boy who cracked the Pentagon became a permanent casualty of the relentless machine he tried to expose.
But the story does not end with his tragic death. During the initial raid in Miami, the FBI seized a specific encrypted folder from his primary hard drive. The directory named Pentagon Trophies. The federal government utilized their most advanced decryption algorithms. They threw NSA supercomputers at the 256-bit lock protecting their own stolen nuclear secrets. They failed. The United States government never cracked it. Somewhere inside a federal evidence locker, sitting on a dusty, decaying hard drive, resides the most sensitive intelligence of the American military. It remains permanently locked behind a password created by a dead teenager. The ultimate security of the United States nuclear arsenal relies entirely on the fact that a 15-year-old boy took his secret to the grave.
If you want more deep dives into the absurd and terrifying reality of true crime and digital heists, hit that subscribe button for Clarity Uncovered. We dissect the systems they do not want you to see.